Before we begin, I want to take a moment to remind you about the upcoming Moving Titan Retreat, October 2nd through the 4th in Tampa, Florida. This will be the only large-scale independent moving conference in North America this year, and you are not going to want to miss this opportunity to hear from 8- and 9-figure moving and home service entrepreneurs and experts while masterminding with up to 500 moving company owners. We're bringing back Tommy Mello, Sean Crane, and Reagan Weiss for 2.5 days, and this isn't going to be some motivational rah-rah event. We are specifically focusing on tactical strategies that you can immediately take home and start multiplying your business headed into the fall and winter. And make sure that you never have another slow winter and off season again. We'll have more networking opportunities, more vendors setting up displays, and a full day workshop on day 3 where you can work directly one-on-one with Tommy and the other speakers to dial in your business. There might even be some surprise guests and entertainment. Visit movingtitanretreats.com. That's movingtitanretreats.com, or check the link in the description and lock in your tickets before we sell out, because we will sell out. I'll see you there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm your host, Wade Sweikel, and today's guest is somebody that I'm reconnecting with after about 10 years. I met our guest today, Nick Friedman, the co-founder of Hunks Hauling Junk, author of Effortless Entrepreneur, star of Millionaire Matchmaker, and a whole bunch of other TV shows and even a movie. Super excited to reconnect with you, Nick. It's been about 10 years since we first met each other up in Gainesville when you were speaking at a conference. I think we watched the World Cup for a while, and then I saw you stand on stage and talk about the new book that had recently come out since then. But a lot's changed in 10 years for both of us, and I'm excited to catch up and give the listeners a glimpse into what a look at the life of a College Hunks founder who has, I mean, how many franchises do you have now? Over 200 or so, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where you guys are currently at, how you got started for anybody who hasn't heard Nick's story. It's an awesome story. He's got a great book that goes into it too. But tell me a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me how you got into junk hauling and then moving and founded College Hunks, one of the largest moving and junk hauling franchises in the country, probably North America, maybe the world. I'm really excited. You know, you were definitely a big inspiration for me in the early years, hearing your story and some of the similarities with you and Omar. Now we're both in the same market here in Tampa, just a few miles away from each other as we do this. But tell me a little bit about your backstory. How did you get the idea? How did the whole thing come to life? And then where are you guys right now?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Great to reconnect with you. It's hard to believe when you say 10 years that much time has passed. It, obviously ages us for one thing. We keep getting further and further from the college theme of our brand that was part of its origin story. But yeah, to give the story of how we got started, probably like most of the listeners, didn't grow up saying I want to be a, moving mogul or moving business owner when I grow up. Went to college summer before my senior year. All I could think about is I need a job when I graduate. What am I going to do this summer? And my best friend from high school, his mom had a beat up cargo van from her furniture store. And she said, why don't you guys go take the van? You can do some odd jobs. You can move people's furniture. You can haul people's junk away. And then she kind of looked us up and down and she goes, you guys could be college hunks who haul junk. And we just kind of laughed about it at first. And then we were like, well, that's kind of catchy. That's not really what people associate with movers and haulers. So we just put it on flyers. And we recognized very quickly people had a need for the service. They thought the name was catchy. And that was sort of the first light bulb moment for me was, this is more fun than sitting in a cubicle, than crunching numbers on spreadsheets or, TPS reports. This was right around the time the movie Office Space came out, which was all about how, unfulfilling the corporate life can be. And so we wrote a business plan our senior year of college. It ended up winning an entrepreneurship competition. That gave us a little bit more confidence in the idea. Graduated and then, had regular jobs briefly and then decided to start this business full time. And I remember there were certainly a lot of doubters. People looked at us, you're going to quit your job to do what? Haul junk and move furniture? And you're going to call it what? College Hunks? Are you throwing away your degree to start a hauling and moving business? Are you crazy? And so we try to use that as motivation and fuel. And of course, again, you and the listeners can probably relate to this. When we started, we were doing all the work ourselves. So we were driving the trucks, answering the phone, lifting the furniture. People would call. We went out and bought an 800 number to try to make ourselves look bigger and feel bigger, even though we just had one truck and it was the number was routed to our cell phone. So people would call the 800 number on the back of the truck to complain about the driving. And, I'd be in the driver's seat answering the phone saying, oh, yeah, we'll fire those guys when they get back to the office. Thanks for reporting to that to us. Probably fired ourselves, 3 or 4 times that first summer. And we started to burn out a little bit. And really, the first next lightning ball moment for us is when we read the book, The E-Myth Revisited, by a guy named Michael Gerber. And I've heard you say it before, and it was sort of a lightning bolt moment for us, is we needed to learn how to work on the business, not just in the business of the everyday activities. And so we got to work, and that exposed us to the concept of franchising, which at the time seemed like a very glamorized phrase. We didn't really know what that meant, but today we call ourselves a 20-year overnight success because it's actually been 20 years. So you and I connected right at the midpoint of our journey 10 years ago. And so here we are, 20 years since the launch of the company. Wow. And we've got, as you mentioned, over 200 franchises as well. So it's been a fun journey, a hard road, but it's been fulfilling as well.
That's awesome, man. And you were on the very first season of Shark Tank. Tell me a little bit about how that transpired and what doors that opened.
We had just started franchising. I think we had like 5 or 6 locations around the country. And we saw an ad in Entrepreneur magazine that said, looking for business entrepreneurs to pitch ideas for a TV show. And it's going to be a pilot episode. And so we were kicking around ideas because we're like, this could be an opportunity to, perhaps raise some money, but also get some exposure on a national platform. And we were sitting at the bar actually having a few drinks, and we were like, well, what if we, instead of pitching them college hunks, what if we had a sister concept and we could call it College Foxes Packing Boxes? And so we sent in a pitch tape, and we got called out to Hollywood, to LA, and we're filming in these ABC studios. And very quickly, the conversation of our pitch turned to our College Hunks business, and we actually got an offer from Robert Herjavec. He wanted 10% of our business and I think 50% of the College Foxes idea, which didn't even exist yet. So he was just like, let's go 50-50 on the idea as a flyer. We ended up turning him down. And, as you said, it ended up becoming the episode 1, season 1 of the series. And I think a lot of people will ask me, did you regret not taking the deal? And, sure, hindsight's, 2020, but I don't think we realized that these sharks were going to ultimately turn out to be TV celebrities because, nobody knew who they were on episode 1. And Mark Cuban hadn't joined the show yet to really make it, sort of mainstream. And so, and had we accepted that investment, it probably would have been worth 100 times what Robert was, offering us back then. So, or maybe 200 times if I think about it. I think we're glad we didn't take it, but it was certainly a fun experience. And again, exposed us to the power of mainstream media. Social media didn't really exist as it is, as ubiquitous as it is today. So, being sort of on a national television platform was pretty impactful for us.
Yeah. And it seems like it's opened up a lot of doors because you've been on a lot of different reality TV shows since then. Like, as soon as that show aired, did your phone just start lighting up with prospective franchisees, people that wanted to invest? Like, tell me, like, what was that experience like once that show aired?
Yeah, I think, every time we've done a reality program, you mentioned, we did the dating show back in our single days where Omar picked up his date in one of our College Hunks trucks to go clean out a garage. Terrible date, would have probably been a meme had those existed back then, but good branding for the company. And so every time we've had some exposure, we've seen, yes, an increase in some web volume, an increase in inquiries. A lot of tire kickers, people just sort of wanting to kind of like learn a little bit more, not necessarily, credible opportunities off the bat, but I think it has done is sort of laid the foundation of credibility that we can leverage and have continued to leverage, ever since appearing on any of those, TV programs. So I think that's more the longevity and the shelf life. Obviously now we've been able to repurpose some of the clips for social media and, we're still talking about it 15 years later. So I think, there's some brand awareness and recognition if people are thinking about making a hire or buying a franchise. If this brand pops up in front of them, there's some connectivity because they might have seen the episode. So those things all I think do help.
Now, did you have like a publicist or an agent that was helping you get onto these shows, or did that just kind of come organically once you got the break with Shark Tank?
We've always been somewhat opportunistic with our antennas up for PR opportunities. Sometimes we've hired some PR agencies. Sometimes we've tried to hire people within our organization to do it themselves. And sometimes we've been the ones just to sort of send out an email or pick up the phone and try to make a pitch. So it's kind of been a bit of a fragmented compilation of ways that we've landed opportunities. But I think we've always had our antennas up and be open minded to be aware of opportunities when they do present themselves so we can jump on them. For example, during COVID, we kept seeing these news stories about domestic violence increasing because people were stuck with the quarantine in homes with their abusers basically, and they couldn't get out. We had seen other moving companies, promote free moves or discounted moves for survivors of domestic violence to kind of escape their situation. And so we said, hey, let's do that as well. And we've got, at the time, 120 locations that we can tap into across the country. Our trucks aren't as busy. And so this could be a way to help the community and also, of course, get our name out there as one that's supporting the communities during this kind of unforeseen circumstance of a pandemic. So that was one that we just sort of, saw this, I'll say, zeitgeist in the media. And then we sort of jumped on it as the way to be able to help. And that also, generated quite a bit of buzz, both, in social media as well as mainstream.
Said like a true entrepreneur. I mean, that's part of why I love the franchising model, is because you have that ownership presence in the markets that you're going into. And it kind of, I feel like that's what it takes to become like a pillar of your community and to be looking out for those local opportunities, like in every single market. Have you kind of felt the same way with the franchising model? Or if you had to do it all over again, would you open more corporate stores?
Yeah, so I'm glad we did franchising. I don't think we could have gotten to this scale or this size had we not gone that route. But I will say, a lot of times people will approach me, not just in our industry, but in any business, small business, and they're like, hey, I want to franchise my company. And I'll actually spend maybe the first 5 minutes asking questions to try to understand their business. And then I'll spend maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes trying to talk them out of franchising, because I think a lot of people us ourselves included, had a very glamorized view of this notion of, the term royalties or passive income. It seems like it's going to be like an easier path to making money or an easier path to scaling a business. And it's not easier, it's just another path. And so, for us, like, we're like, okay, it's really hard to run a local business. Maybe if we had individual owners, they could run it and we wouldn't have to worry about it as much. And so I think a lot of people get into franchising thinking it's going to be like a pressure release valve, but it really isn't. It's actually a pressure cooker, because now you got to have 50, 100 franchises, across your system before you're really what they call royalty self-sufficient, where the royalties are supporting the infrastructure that you have to keep investing in. So you're relying on the upfront franchise fees. So then you make the mistake of letting the wrong people into your system. You make the mistake of, spreading yourself too far geographically, so you can't provide the support for them. And so I think we didn't have that reality check when we got into it. We just kind of got into it blindly. And then once we were into it, we were like, we just got to keep going. We were, hand in, other hand in, leg in, head in. And we just got to keep going down, marching down this pathway. And of course, eventually we made it across this chasm where, we've got a really strong, robust franchise network. We've got very successful, profitable franchisees. And, we've got a really sound system. But it took us a long march through I would say, treacherous terrain to try to get there, and made a lot of mistakes and scrapes along the way. So I think as long as people are open-minded about what franchising is and isn't, it is an expansion strategy and a way to capitalize your business through, sort of these individual franchise sites that you set up and that you sell. You're kind of, micro funding through the franchise fees, but it takes a lot of heavy lifting to get to the other side, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. Most of you have heard me talk about Moversville and the power of their email marketing service that has helped us increase leads by over 112% over the last year. But have you heard of Moversville Connect? Moversville Connect is an incredible resource for all things moving. They feature an array of vendors and services and lists like insurance providers, softwares, equipment suppliers, marketing sources, and much, much more. The best part, this resource is free. Go check out Moversville Connect today by going to moversville.com and clicking Connect. That's moversville.com and click Connect and discover the world of Moversville beyond email. One of the worst parts about owning a moving company has to be finding quality movers and drivers. Trying to run all the job ads takes up time, and then you schedule guys to come in for interviews and they never show up. It's a massive headache.
Well, let me tell you about a good friend of mine named Winston who runs a company called Move Up Consulting. Move Up specializes in hiring and recruiting for the moving and storage industry, and they do all the lead generation for mover and driver candidates. They have a fully built hiring CRM, plus you get a dedicated account manager who phone interviews and screens all of your candidates. Once they find qualified candidates, they schedule in-person interviews for you and your management team so you can make great hires. They even handle all the appointment confirmations. It's that simple. To start building a better moving team today, visit moveupconsulting.com and tell them Wade sent you.
Want to know what the silver bullet for growing your business is? USA Home Listings. USA Home Listings has a myriad of marketing services that are essential to every single moving company. It blows my mind when I have conversations with people who reach out looking for help, trying to get leads, trying to get the phone to ring, that aren't doing mailers and aren't subscribed to USA Home Listings. The data there is so invaluable, and it's not just home listing data, even though that's an awesome, super easy, super intuitive feature that they provide where you can filter out all of the homes that recently went under contract or got listed in your neighborhood, and a new coming soon feature before it even hits the MLS that you can filter out through zip codes, towns, cities, counties, prices. But that's just one small feature that they do. They also have turnkey mailing services. They'll help you design your postcard, a postcard that actually gets results. If you've tried mailers in the past and it didn't work, it's probably because you didn't have the right elements on your postcard. And they also have a social media division. So check out usahomelistings.com. It's an essential addition to all of your marketing needs. Before you do any other marketing, check out usahomelistings.com. I know you've been on Tommy Mello's podcast a few years ago. I listened to that episode. He's going to be headlining our event coming up, and I had the privilege to join him on there last fall, I believe it was. And we talked a little bit about franchising. And he, as you may know, has 26 garage door service locations with A1. He doesn't like the franchise model because he, has various reasons. And I'm curious, what are some of the cons to franchising
Yeah.
that you've come across? We're just getting into it. We've got a couple of them under our belt right now. And I'm starting to kind of see where he was going with that. He's more in the mindset of corporately run stores until you've got, 5 locations, $500,000 in cash in the bank that you can put into it to do it right. Otherwise don't even think about it because everybody
Yeah.
wants to franchise and you kind of become a babysitter, so to speak. But what have you found to be some of the biggest hardships or struggles in
Yeah.
franchising?
Well, yeah, he makes a good point about the capital required because, especially nowadays with the franchise broker networks and the consultant networks, there's so much of a sort of like entry fee to be able to be presented as a concept that you can actually convert and sell a franchise. So the cost of acquisition for a new franchisee is very high that it kind of erodes the franchise fee that you're collecting. So, on the surface, you get into it, it's like, oh, I can charge 50,000 for a franchise fee, but it's like, how much did it cost you to get how many leads that you had to run through to get that sale? So there is some challenges at the upfront of converting new franchise deals. And then the other thing I think is, the franchise is a partnership, even though it's not, in the formal sense. You can't necessarily fire the franchisee. You can fire an underperforming manager and replace that underperforming manager, hopefully with somebody who's going to perform. And so your system is only as good as the quality of the franchisees. And there's sort of this cart before the horse because you need franchisees to be able to invest and build the system, but you need the system to be able to support and help develop successful franchisees. So I think that's some of the challenge is there. If you talk to franchisors, they'll tell you that the happy middle you never really hear from, but sometimes really successful franchisees might resent the franchisor because they feel like they're paying too much in fees. And really unsuccessful franchisees are going to blame the franchisor because they feel like you should have, made them rich. And when in reality, we're going to give them an opportunity to become wealthy and to become successful. We're going to provide them with the tools and the playbook and the resources to become successful. And so I think those will be some of the things to just be aware of and pitfalls to look out for. We were warned early on, don't sell too much territory. We were warned, don't do the fog mirror trick where you're just selling to anybody that can fog a mirror and write a check. But you're actually vetting these individuals. Do they fit with the culture? Are they going to work hard? Are they going to give up the minute, an employee doesn't show up, or a truck breaks down on the side of the road, or a customer's, furniture gets damaged? Is it going to be too stressful for them? Or are they really willing to, put in the effort? So I think those are some of the things that I think are tricky with franchising, because if you hire the wrong employee, it's very easy. You swap them out, you hopefully get it right the next time. But if you got a franchise owner, you got to try to really put all your energy in to help them become successful, profitable, fulfilled. And that's not easy. And because a lot of franchisees may not have the same sort of just pain threshold or stress tolerance that we as founders have, maybe sometimes taken for granted, that just we think comes naturally, but a lot of people, may not be built that way.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it definitely takes a special type of person to be a franchisor, or just a business owner in general. And with the franchisee, it's like they're not buying a job; they're 100% an owner of that location. But it's like a hybrid, almost like a
Yeah.
job slash a business owner,
Yeah.
because you expect them probably to work in the business for a period of time to really fully understand all the different roles, to be able to hire out for the right type of
Hmm.
person for those roles. But then they have that support system to fall back on,
Yeah.
and the processes and the branding and stuff that's already in place from the back end. We've sold two so far. We just started franchising
Yes.
last year. We sold our original location in Gainesville as a franchise last summer, and then we just opened one in San Antonio, Texas. And I've been to a bunch of trade shows, been gotten hundreds of leads, and it's tough to find people that you each check each other's boxes, because we're looking for a certain type of person to fit our model and our culture. And then that person needs to also understand the franchise model and want to get into something like the moving industry. In your case, I'm sure your first franchises were junk, but how did you get like the first few? Because what I
Yeah.
understand is like you got to get some momentum, you got to have the concept proven with other owners in order to really get that momentum to build it up to a huge organization like you have with over 200 people. Like, what were those early days in franchising like?
Yeah, I think back to the early days, it was kind of the Wild West, kind of like, the franchise version of, me answering the phone while pretending I was, in the office. It's like, I think our first franchisee was a buddy of my business partners from college. He didn't have cash to buy the franchise, so he gave us like land in Central Florida that he got stuck with during the, 2008 housing crisis. We still own that land, by the way, and I don't think it's gone up in value. I think it's, we just are paying taxes on it. So it's like, maybe that'll be our doomsday bunker at some point or something. But, and then, of course, I think we sold them like all of Orlando and all of Tampa, and there's no way you can service that much territory out of one operation. And then we sold a franchise out in San Francisco. Like there's no way for us to go out and support that, so we're flying across the country, and we're trying to send an employee across the country to help support them. So we made a lot of mistakes in those early days, and we just kept marching forward. Is I guess the best I could say it. The quality and the quantity started to improve over time. We got to a point where we could be a little bit more discerning about who we would bring into the franchise system, a little bit less reliant on each individual franchise. So, the franchisee couldn't, sort of tell us how things should be done. We were able to, prescribe the best practices and keep everybody within the framework of our model. And, today I think, our franchisees are just much more sophisticated and much more, I think, committed to the culture and the model that we have in place. Our best franchisees, I always say, they view the leadership development component of the business as a blessing, not a burden. They view the opportunity to, as you said, to be a pillar in their community as something they're passionate about. And in the early days, it was like, how do we get our franchisees to get to break even? And now it's like, we just came back from visiting one of our franchisees. They just bought a, beautiful mansion overlooking the water with the sunset. They've got a Sprinter van taking them into New York City, and it's like like, man, this is cool. We created some millionaires out of our franchise system, and that's really what we ultimately aspired to do in the early days. And I think it's just a combination of compound effort and compound improvement. Time is your friend for sure, because urgency of effort and patience of results has paid off over time. But I think even when I met you 10 years ago, we weren't even barely there yet. It was like we didn't hit our tipping point, I would say, until really, maybe the couple years right before COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so were you buying leads? Were you going to trade shows? I'm sure Shark Tank and some of those media
Yeah.
appearances, the reality shows helped, but like, where were the early
Yeah.
franchisees coming from? I talked to some franchise owners in the moving space that, they get employees to buy into it, or they give them a franchise with
Yeah.
no franchise fee.
We've had some mixed results with that approach. I mean, we've done, the franchise portals, right? The websites where you're paying for leads, but sometimes people might be checking boxes for like 10 different franchise opportunities. So they're getting inundated and bombarded with calls from different franchisors. We've tried the trade shows. We've done the broker networks or consultant networks where, it's almost like real estate agents for franchising. They help people find franchises that they want to purchase, and then they'll get a commission if they end up buying, our franchise. We've done that, our PR approach. So it's sort of a multi-tiered approach, referral program for our existing franchisees to recommend and refer their friends or relatives or colleagues from prior professional experiences. So unfortunately, just like, with consumer marketing, there's not one lever that you pull that's going to, turn it all on. It's sort of this integrated approach, and you can't put all your eggs into one effort, and you can't, skimp on ones that could produce.
Yeah, I know now you have a big, beautiful corporate office. I'm sure that definitely helps when they come into town for Discovery Day or Discovery Weeks, whatever. You have a huge support team. I know you've got a big staff that's locally based here in Tampa with the call center model. And, I've seen stuff online, tours and stuff like that. It's an amazing setup. It's definitely a dream setup. But in the beginning, was it really just you and Omar
Yeah.
kind of, babysitting all these new
Yeah.
franchisees? Did you have mentors, consultants?
Yeah, our office felt like a shoebox, really. And we had too many employees by the time we had franchisees coming in for discovery days and for training. And so we had to move some of our employees into a closet to work while we were training these franchisees. Some of the franchise owners, I'm surprised some of them that bought, quite frankly, in those early days. Cause like I were thinking about investing in a franchise, and I come and I see this sort of ragtag, setup. But I think what they believed in was the vision. I think they believed in, the passion and energy that we had, in store for the brand. And so, not all those early day franchisees are still part of the system. Things have turned over and been resold and, upgraded or replaced. But yeah, in those early days, it was definitely a bit of a, paperclip and duct tape situation.
You and I both have collegiate branded companies. And, in the beginning, like that was the story for both of us. We both were getting our start either in college, right out of college, in college towns. And, we've evolved a lot since that. And I'm sure we're doing a lot of really big things that aren't just hiring the college kid and servicing the college student dorm moves anymore. That may have been kind of how we started. But have you found that having a collegiate branded company has been like a bonus, like a good thing that has helped the business grow? Or have you found that sometimes it might limit a client's
Yeah.
perspective or a prospective franchisee's perspective? Like, I mean, obviously 20 years in, like, and you guys have done just fine with it, but I'm just kind of curious, like, is the
Yeah.
collegiate branding, what's your opinion if you had to do it all over again with that?
You know what's funny is we've toyed with the idea multiple times over the years as to whether it helps or hurts, whether the college part of our name helps or the Hunks part of our name helps or hurts. We made Hunks into an acronym which stands for honest, uniformed, nice, knowledgeable service. So
I
that
love
became
that.
our brand promise that we define and redefine Hunks. So it's not about the physical attributes, it's about what our clients can expect from us. But the college piece is a little bit trickier because I'm not sure whether that still resonates or not. We actually went through a kind of an existential brand identity crisis in like the 2012 2013 timeframe, probably right around the time before I met you, where we did a bunch of surveys, we did a bunch of interviews, we kind of tested some alternative brand names, and we were all sort of set to potentially rebrand because we were kind of second guessing ourselves a little bit. We were like, hey, is this preventing us from getting, bigger, larger home moves? Is this preventing us from getting the corporate accounts? Are people expecting, unprofessionalism if they see the word college in here? And the answer is probably yes to all of those things. But one of my mentors, he came and said, look, you're considering, wiping the slate clean with your name. And maybe we had 30 franchises at the time. He said, the market has already spoken. Like you've already grown to a point that's past, scratching and clawing startup phase. So the market has told you that it works. Now, maybe it, still turns some people off, but there's enough people that are accepting of your brand name that it's probably not worth the risk of wiping it off altogether and trying to, restart. He said to me, that feels a little bit like desperation. I said, okay, you know what? we're going to put our heads down. We're not going to question it again. And we're just going to keep rocking because, we had TV appearances and we're like, well, hey, maybe the TV appearances wouldn't have happened if we were, strong guys movers or whatever, it's, I don't know, so I'm making up a name, but, or Nick's movers, whatever. So we just decided to stick with it. We're doing some things with our messaging, I would say, to try to overcome potential objections that people might have to, the question is like, are they all really in college? Is it a marketing gimmick? Okay. Here's the brand story. It was started by college students, hence the name. This company's like a school. We're teaching and training individuals. It's all about leadership development. So we try to address it so it's not a brand negative, but it's been in conversation ever since our existence. And we've seen, complaints on reviews sometimes, they weren't really in college. They weren't really hunks. And it's like, oh, well, you weren't supposed to take it so literally, but of course people do.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got a great story. I recently had Dan Antonelli on the podcast. He's a branding expert for the home service industry. He did all Tommy Mello's branding. He's done a few Tampa companies, HVAC, any home services. And, we had that conversation too. I was like, well, do you think like a name change may open some more doors, a rebrand? And I mean, this far into it, we're 14 years into it ourselves. And, he's basically said, no, I don't see anything necessarily wrong with it. It's all about the messaging that you convey. It's the story that your brand tells. You obviously have a great story. And, obviously don't try to fix something that's not broken at the end of the day. And I think a lot of companies, are going to second guess their name at times. And some companies don't have the best name and they do okay. And maybe they could have done better with a different name. But I've always been under the belief when I've ever had those thoughts of second guessing is that a brand doesn't make a company makes a brand. And I think you've done a great job with that.
That's a great way to put it. I might have to take that one from you. I like that.
Feel free. In case you haven't already heard about it, I want to tell you about the latest project that I've been working on called Tighten Up Training. And it's not just me, it's 3 other world-class moving company owners from around North America that have pooled together our resources, our time, and our knowledge to bring you the #1 training program for moving companies in the world. We've got over 200 videos on mover training, sales, culture, leadership, and we're continuing to add more and more to streamline training. We gamify the process in short little videos that are easy for your team to follow, and they're quizzed on retention. Rather than spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own money and months of your time tying up resources away from your own moving company, we're bringing you Tighten Up Training for less than the cost of 1 damage claim a month or less than the cost of booking 1 extra move per month. You book 1 extra move, it pays for itself. You save the time to have to take away time from your day or pay somebody to train new employees and to onboard new employees, it pays for itself. You avoid 1 damage claim or book 1 extra move a month, you got it. It pays for itself. It's so affordable. And we put so much time, money, and resources into this to build out something that our companies can use every day so that we can tighten up this summer and reduce claims. Since our company has gone on here, we're booking more jobs than ever, and we're reducing more claims than we've ever had. And we are teed up to have the best summer ever. So check out Tighten Up Training. Schedule a free 30-minute demo today by going to tightenuptraining.com. So you released the book, Effortless Entrepreneur, and everything I've understood with business owners, CEOs who write books, I've recently just completed one that hasn't been published yet, working on that process. But I understand it's like a calling card. It's basically the best business card you can have when you give out to somebody. And I think you had just released the book when we met about 10 years ago, maybe a year before. So, what opportunities has the book Effortless Entrepreneur opened for you? Because I know it was a bestseller. What was that process like?
So what's funny is I was at a conference, I think it was an EO Entrepreneurs Organization conference, and one of the speakers got up on stage and he said, who's ever written a book always says they wish they wrote it 10 years ago. So just start writing. And, if you ink it, you own it, is basically what he said. And so we went to, I think, the bar afterwards and we were talking. We were like, I guess we got to write a book. And we were like, well, what are we going to write about? And, we were like, well, let's write what we wish we knew then, in high school and college that we've now learned since being sort of in the fire, having started a business. And so it was, as you said, about 10 years ago that it came out. So I'm glad I wrote it 10 years ago so I don't have to write it now. And I reread it recently, and I would say 80 to 85% of it is still very relevant. I might change 10 to 15% of it only because of just, the way business has evolved. And also I think, at the time I was in my 20s, I was a bachelor. I was trying to write it from this sort of like a bit of an edge to try to be like the next Tim Ferriss or 4 Hour Work Week. And, I probably would have softened that tone a little bit if I'm now writing it in my 40s. But I think that's the way I would approach it. As far as the impact of it, it's opened doors for public speaking, as you mentioned. It's opened doors for franchise conversations. If I meet young entrepreneurs now, I'll send them a copy of it and just say, hey, this was kind of our story when we were a few years into our business and the things that we had learned. So I think you can't go wrong with it. And now more than ever, it's you can self-publish, and I mean, I don't know if it's considered cheating or not, but you can use AI to help you, craft it and ghostwrite it and edit it and so forth. So by all means, I think there's still power in having that physical content that you can, share with other people, because it allows you to also just sort of pour your vision, your values, your experience, your knowledge, as well as other things you've learned from other people as well, and make it your own. So I think it's kind of like your quote about a company makes a brand. I think an individual can make a book, or a book can make an individual. I don't know how which way that one plays, but I think it does help support the overall leader's brand as well.
Yeah, and everybody, with the AI and ghostwriters and all that, those can never replace your own story and your own experiences. And I loved hearing about all those early days and the lessons that you took away. I think I read it like 4 times,
Oh wow.
years ago. Yeah, I still have it somewhere, but it's a great book. Definitely check it out. Effortless Entrepreneur. So when you got that, did you get a book deal like with a main publishers? Did you
So we
self-publish it first?
We did. I was just always under the impression that we were going to self-publish, but Omar, my business partner, he was like, "No, we got to swing for the fences. Let's do some research. Let's try to find a literary agent. Like, we've been on TV, we can position this." Now, in today's day and age, unless you have a major social media following or major platform, you may not get a book deal because they're looking for how you're going to be able to promote it. Again, back then that wasn't as prolific, and so our platform was that we had been on Shark Tank, we had been on some of these other reality shows. Our business had kind of crossed the threshold of franchising and so forth, and so there was some credibility there. So we ended up hiring a literary agent. She put a pitch deck together and some samples of the book, and we were also able to land some really powerful quotes for the book, blurbs for the book, as to support it. And that was just through rolling up our sleeves and tracking people down at conferences and asking them if they'd be willing to give us a quote for the book and things like that. And so I think we got two offers. One was really, really low, and one was a more meaningful 5-figure offer, I think, at the time. And we ended up taking that one, of course. And it was with a subsidiary of Random House. I think it was called Three Rivers Press. And we were really, I think, just lucky, quite frankly, because they obviously did all the distribution and publication and printing and everything. But yeah, so we got a little lucky there.
Hey, I love the saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And you guys have definitely put the work in, and you happen to find all these opportunities. You threw things against the wall, and a lot of it stuck. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So with your franchises, like, as you're helping them grow in their market, what's like kind of the biggest appealing factor when they invest in your brand, and then when they are trying to solicit for new business, when you first go into a market? I know
Yeah.
you're huge on branding. Like, is that the kind of the magic bullet that you feel like your company has for the franchisees?
I think branding, I think culture, and I think service. I think those are sort of
Mm.
the three pillars that we deliver. And then the technical stuff on the back end. We've got a call center that answers the phones for them. We've got a software that helps convert leads online and keeps their schedule organized. We more recently launched a bookkeeping solution and service for the franchisees, is to handle a lot of the back office accounting, that also allows us to create benchmarks and comparisons for franchisees to see how their labor rate stacks up against their colleagues and counterparts in our business, create some fun competitions around that. Of course, the marketing playbook, the vendors that we try to bring to the table for them. All of those things kind of compile to bring value to the individual franchise owner, so that we want them focusing on hiring and training really quality people that are going to be the face of the brand in their community, the movers and haulers, the hunks. And we want them to be focused on training, and then, of course, being, we like to say, the mayor of their market, going to the networking functions and positioning themselves in the community where they can be a known entity and a resource for people who might need the moving and hauling solution that we offer.
No, that makes total sense. And I know when you guys first started out, the yellow pages were still a thing,
They
probably up
sure
until
were.
about like 2008, 2010, sometime around there is when Google started to really become like the force, the thing
Yeah.
that people went to when they were looking for a reference. And a lot's changed since then. I think, back then, if you could have the best website and the best, pay per click and, the digital marketing side, like most other home service companies, especially movers or junk haulers, didn't really have that. It was a very fragmented space, a lot of old school players in it. And if you could do that, you could stand out and get a lot of business. Now everybody has a website. Everybody's got an agency they're working with for SEO, pay per click, LSA, Facebook, Meta, all that stuff. It's everywhere. And I almost feel like that space is becoming a lot more saturated. And I love that term, become a mayor of your market, because it's really coming all back to the grassroots, I think, building the relationships in your community and getting present. What changes have you noticed over the last 20 years in your approach to marketing and getting new business into the door?
Yeah. Well, things have definitely changed, and then things have also stayed the same. Like some of the early guerrilla marketing stuff, grassroots marketing stuff that we did in the early days, we still preach today. And then, of course, to your point, Yellow Pages is by far a thing of the past. Google has gotten dramatically more expensive and competitive more recently. I think we've gotten, I think a lot of us in every industry have relied very much on the bottom of the funnel opportunities with Google, sort of direct demand based search marketing. And so we're starting to think about, what are some creative things we can do top of funnel, whether it's, TV, radio, things that we, strategic partnerships, relationships that can, help, bring, lead flow to us. Now we're fortunate because we've got a 200 plus location platform. We can start thinking about some national accounts that could be beneficial to our franchisees, where that was always something I would attempt to do. And then, the conversation will inevitably turn to, well, it's like, okay, you can only service these 30 markets. That doesn't really help us because then we got to find somebody else for these other 130. And so, so those are some of the things that have started to manifest for us. Social media, to be honest with you, has just gotten so confusing for me, and maybe it's just because I'm old and I'm dating myself, but it's like it's hard because there's so many different platforms, and there's so many impressions that people are just scrolling. So being able to capture attention, somehow hoping to go viral, I guess is something else. So we've done some things with like micro influencers and things like that have mixed results. It's hard to measure, it's hard to track. That's the other thing is with marketing attribution, at least with Google, if how much you spent and how much you converted, because how many people came to your website. But with some of the other things, it's really hard to measure. And I think that's where some business owners give up a little bit too soon, because it's more art than science. And they kind of start pulling levers haphazardly, or they pull back on their marketing spend because they're worried about budget and cash flow, which is, especially in this climate, a reasonable thing to be concerned about. So it's hard to say, but yeah, I think it's everything on the scope of things. It's where can people find you, where can you get found, how can you go find them, and those would be sort of the strategies, and then what are the tactics that can kind of support those strategies.
Yeah, no doubt. And like you said before, it's just a lot of little levers. There's not one thing. You gotta do it all. And at the end of
Yeah.
the day, people like to do business with people. And if you can just be where they're at and have your service ready to go for when they're ready to use it, then that make that path of least resistance come to life. I know over the last few years you've been doing some more exciting projects. I saw that you recently co-starred in a movie about Jeff Bezos. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So all these little, what my wife calls side quests, I've needed to scale back on, because as entrepreneurs, we have, I would say, a little bit of ADD, right? It
Oh
says
yeah.
for all damn day, it's like to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To an entrepreneur, everything looks like an opportunity. And so it's difficult to try to restrain yourself or have the discipline of focus. So I've been able to, and lucky enough to be able to pursue some passion projects. The movie was one that came about. I was actually friends with a guy here in Tampa who owns the Tampa Yankees, Tarpons minor league baseball team, and I was at a game with him. And one of the things he does as well is he makes movies, and he always gets they're mid-budget movies, but he always gets the rights to kind of a big name that can help him package and sell the movie. So he did a movie about Walt Disney called Walt Before Mickey. He also got the rights to a live action version of Little Mermaid and Anastasia and a few other things. So I was sitting at the baseball game with him, and he goes, I know you've done these reality, unscripted shows, but would you ever, be interested in a scripted project? And he goes, I just bought the script to the first movie that's ever going to be made about Jeff Bezos. It's a biopic, and it's going to be all about the beginning, the founding of Amazon. So he sent me the script. I read through it, and with the exception of a few zeros, missing from our balance sheet, it felt a lot like any of our startup stories. The guy quit his job. He went out and got a ragtag crew. He went in a garage and he started this business, and it was, a struggle. And so when I read it, I was like, I can certainly relate to this entrepreneurial story. It's probably the most famous entrepreneur of our lifetime, at least one of the most famous, amongst a small handful. And so I said, yeah, I'd like to be involved. And he says, do you want to be a producer? Do you want to act in it? I said, if I'm going to check this, bucket list box, put me in. So I played the role of Shel Caffin, who was actually the very first employee that Jeff Bezos hired to come work in the garage for him when he moved across the country to Seattle. So that was my role in the movie. It's in all the digital streaming platforms. I think they're still waiting for Netflix, but it's on Apple and Prime and all those other streaming platforms as well. And it was a fun experience. And, I chalk it up to a life experience. It wasn't a big moneymaker for me, but I view it as it's an evergreen story. People are always going to want to know, how did Amazon get started? And, if they don't want to read a book or article about it, there's a movie option for them. And, I'm not go climb a big mountain or go, jump out of an airplane to skydive for my bucket list. So I just looked at this as something to, spend some time and money on to check that life experience list. So it was cool. It was pretty cool.
I love it. Do you find opportunities like that pretty unrelated to what you do with College Hunks? Do they benefit College Hunks? Does it give you some publicity that can relay back to the business?
Yeah. So I think two things. I think one, it stretches the comfort zone, which just helps you become a better leader, helps you become more comfortable being uncomfortable, doing something new or different. I think two, as long as our franchisees and employees don't think I'm, spending all my time doing that and neglecting the business, I think, it creates a level of intrigue and respect that I'm willing to talk when I preach stretching our comfort zone. And another example of that actually is about a year ago, I did a stand-up comedy challenge along with Omar here at the Tampa Improv, where we had to get up and each do a 10-minute stand-up comedy set, which, easier than it sounds, but it was scary. And thankfully we had kind of a home crowd. So a lot of friends and family. So it ended up landing pretty well. But that was, again, something that I did. And so to answer your question about how does it help, I think, yes, it helps with social media. It helps with branding. It helps with, creating some buzz and awareness. I was able to do some interviews with media about the movie, founder of College Hunks, producing and acting in the movie about Jeff Bezos. So there was some tie in there. So everything, yes, we want to try to integrate and support the mothership, which is, still putting food on the table.
That's awesome. No, that's so cool to see that stuff. I saw the comedy thing and I wish I could have seen the whole set, but that's awesome, man. You're really like a Renaissance man. You put yourself out there in all these different positions and, it helps you grow as a person. And then I'm sure that translates back into your business. Thinking about like the last few years, obviously it's been a very unique time in the economy and the business and politics, everything going on. COVID, changed a lot of things. And now we're out of COVID, but we've got high interest rates and a lot of other factors. It's an election year. What was the COVID experience like for your organization? I mean, you had at that point probably close to the 200, if not over the 200 franchisees. How
Yeah.
did you lead them through such a turbulent, like unknown time period and, make sure that they were able to keep their doors open, especially in all the various markets where everything was probably different in different parts of the country?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely scary. I mean, there was the fear of losing everything we had worked for. There was the fear of, 200 franchisees losing everything they had invested in. There was the fear of actually, getting this pandemic and not knowing what that would do just because it was so early on and you weren't sure what the media, was portraying, how accurate everything was with mixed messaging. And so, the first couple of weeks, I remember wanted to just crawl up to my bed and, suck my thumb. I was like, I was fearful. And then I realized like, I've got to lead, I've got to get in front of this. And so I had to, I spent time calling every single one of our franchisees, asking how they were doing, making sure they were, taking advantage of the government support that was coming out, to help small businesses, the PPP loans and things like that. And so, just making sure they were taking the proper steps, looking after their crews and so forth. And, fortunately, the bounce back was very quick because I think the government pumped so much money, right or wrong, into the stimulus, into the bailout that, people started moving much more quickly. They were spending money on home improvements. And there was this like frenzy coming out of COVID, as I'm sure, you and the listeners experienced. And so there was sort of this like whiplash effect. It was like COVID, everything stopped. Then we got whiplashed out of it. Now it feels like everything's stopping again because the interest rate. So, inflation got out of control. So it's like somebody's in a car is like, slamming on the brakes and slamming on the gas and slamming on the brakes again. And that can be very disorienting for an entrepreneur and then for your entire team as well. So I think just, coming out of the COVID piece, what that taught me is, maintaining a steady hand, calm demeanor, a long-term perspective and outlook and optimism of things, and keeping communication consistent and frequent with the teams that are involved, because it's very easy to get sort of sidetracked or distracted what the media is saying or what the economists are saying or what the housing market is saying, right? I mean, you look at the headlines, I think housing moves are down 20-30%, across the country in most markets. So, with inevitably that's going to impact our business, but it's going to impact every business, as well. And so, inflation's a real thing. Wage inflation's a real thing. Things cost a lot more. Our industry, it's harder to raise our prices because there's, a lot of competition. And there's also just sort of the consumer presumption of, I'm going to try to find the least expensive option. So, whereas everything else costs twice what it did, 3 years ago, our business, we're kind of like almost flat on our average job sizes. So it's tough to manage through that. So I think just communicating and being gritty and resilient to understand that there's cycles. You read books, you look at history. There's economic fluctuation. Some are a lot worse than others. We had a really bad housing market in 2008 through 2012, a crash really, and then we had this 8-year run, and then a pandemic, and then this false start of growth, and then this high inflation. So it's just the cycles that I think we're going to go through and continue to go through. We got to just be able to weather it and keep getting better.
Yeah, no doubt. What do you see is next for the moving industry going forward? Do you think we're going to come out, back to a real estate market, maybe not as on fire as it was when the interest rates were
Right.
zero, but like, I mean, they're predicting some rate cuts in September, maybe again by the end of the year, by the election, whatever. Like, what do you think the next year, 2 years looks like for our space?
Yeah, so we're what about, I think it was about 2 to 2.5 years ago when things started to slow down with the interest rates getting raised, right? It was like kind of coming out of
Mm.
21, things were boomtown, and then mid 22, things started to kind of like feel like they were going to slow down because the interest rates were getting pushed up. But we're kind of going to, I personally think we're going to kind of hit a steady state where there's like a new normal of interest rates. Like even when I bought my first rental property in the pre housing market crash, I think my interest rate was like in the mid 5%. And I didn't think that was like crazy high. I thought that was like a reasonable percentage. And then you talk to some people whose, parents lived through the 80s when interest rates were like 18%. So like I think people just are sort of in this like freeze period because they were so accustomed to like 2%, 0% interest rates. And now they're sort of like, on the sidelines hoping for a rate cut. So I do think things will open up a little bit more when there's rate cuts. I do, to your point, in an election year, maybe people are going to hold off on making major life decisions until they sort of see where the dust settles, and things are still, the sun is still coming up tomorrow no matter who gets elected. And so I think that's I think that's the approach that we need to have is play the long game, sort of weather the ups and downs, and don't get too big or too ahead of your skis when things are going well, and don't clam up too much when things are tight.
Yeah, no doubt. What's your current role? Like, you and Omar obviously were the founders, the CEO, president. You were really involved with the franchising piece for so long. What are you doing now? Like, what do you and Omar currently do to serve the College Hunks
Yeah.
organization?
So I think, we kind of coined or defined ourselves as co-visionaries at this point. And so our role is to help set the strategic vision of the organization, make sure that, the culture and the values are continuing to be communicated and upheld, be a cheerleader for the team, provide resources and remove barriers for the team, and really just be a brand ambassador, a spokesperson for franchising, for the move and hauling industry, like we're doing, here, and, for our organization as a whole. I've obviously created a pretty broad network of business people that I'm associated and connected to. So, being able to provide and bring potential resources to the organization that could be beneficial, whether it's a national partnership opportunity or a national marketing opportunity, continue to scout those things. So, I would describe, because we have a brand president that runs the day to day, who's way more talented than me or Omar ever were with leading people and holding, systems and structure in place, and a really robust leadership team. And I feel like we've, really top graded the organization from top to bottom. I'm in a bit of an entrepreneurial nirvana state where it's like, I don't really have to worry, but I also thrive a little bit on stress because that's just kind of how I'm wired. So I continue to at least, bring new curveballs into my life, either, intentionally or by accident. And that could be some other business ventures that I've invested in or been involved with starting up that, are taking up some time and energy because they're in a little bit more of a delicate emerging phase. And so I can't just be complacent or sit idle, I guess.
Where do you see College Hunks going next?
I think that to me, I'm excited about maximizing the potential of my own leadership and then the brand as a platform. And so I think we've, scratched the surface with the local moving and junk removal side of things. I think we can get better with long distance moving. I think we can get better with storage. I think we can explore potentially other brand extensions or ancillary solutions that we might be able to leverage with our platform. So to me, the sky's the limit. And to me, it's all about making a positive impact with our team members, our franchise owners. I'd love to see every one of our franchise owners be millionaires. I'd love to see, the brand become a billion-dollar brand and continue to become sort of iconically recognized, not just in the moving or hauling industry, but just in the service industry and the franchise space. Those are some of the big kind of audacious goals that we've set out for ourselves.
You got to have those big, hairy, audacious goals.
Right.
So, some of the other speakers at our retreat are going to be talking about some of the other opportunities that moving has opened up for them. Once they get to a place similar to where you're at with making it almost like a passive income, of course, being involved with the vision and some of the leadership, but there's real estate plays that you can use moving as a vehicle to get into things like that. There's other business opportunities in totally different industries. I'm just curious, like over the last 20 years, you've built up this vehicle that has generated tons and tons of wealth. What have you done to, open up some other opportunities with that vehicle? I mean, what other industries, projects, business ventures are you involved in?
Sure. So definitely real estate. I'm a big fan. There was a quote, I forget who said it, but he said, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. And
Mhm.
so we bought some of our buildings over the years, our headquarters, some of our, dispatch centers. That's been successful both in appreciation and in just sort of paying our own rent to ourselves. And then some of the buildings that we no longer occupy, we have tenants in. So that's been great. I have found that I'm actually not a great investor, like because everything sounds like a good idea. So some of the things in entrepreneurial, startups that I've invested in have done okay, but some haven't, quite frankly. And so I want to try to keep the main thing in that regard. We did get into a kind of a niche industry serving apartments in the multifamily space that is taking up a decent amount of time. We raised some outside capital for, and so that similar labor force, decentralized labor force, kind of what we're accustomed to. And I do think you're right. Everything opens up doors, but you also got to be somewhat selective because if you chase every shiny object, you're going to be kind of a mile wide and an inch deep. So I'm actually looking forward to that panel as well to hear some of the other things that maybe I haven't thought about or have overlooked as well.
Yeah, one of the topics we're going to be talking about, Tommy is super well versed in, is private equity and roll up opportunities. He sold, I think, like 51 or 52% of A1 to private equity, woke up one morning with $300 million in his bank account, bought back half the business, but he made 25 people millionaires that worked, top level people in his company that worked for him overnight, basically, by getting involved with private equity. Have you had any experience with private equity or any ambitions to kind of do like what all my sons did with private equity and exit at any point in down the
Yeah.
road?
So yes, we did sell actually a minority stake in our company about 3 years ago in 2021 to a private equity group out of Philadelphia. Been very happy with the outcome. It didn't put 300 million in my bank account at that transaction, but it did put some liquidity in the account, which was kind of a nice to have because we had been sort of relying on distributions and reinvesting in the business. So that was kind of a cool milestone for us, and it allowed us to maintain majority of the control of the business as well. Now, we haven't done any acquisitions as a result of that. I think it's, I haven't seen, some necessarily viability in acquiring, other moving companies because we've got the franchise model, but, perhaps ancillary brands or services that we could tuck in or build into a platform could be part of the next phase of growth. We've talked about that. But I do think there's a role in private equity if you can get to a certain stage of profit level and EBITDA margin, that it might make sense to either create some liquidity for the founders, maybe the team members that have been part of that growth journey, as you mentioned with Tommy, and then also to have capital to go out and do some strategic growth stuff. But it is, you're selling ownership in the business, so it's probably the most expensive form of capital you can get versus borrowing or other opportunities as well.
Yeah, we just see a huge opportunity in the moving space. It's such a fragmented industry. Of course, you've got big players like you in the franchise side. There's obviously the Two Men in a Truck franchise. I mean, you guys are the two biggest franchises, I believe. Then you've got some corporate companies like your All My Sons and some of the van lines, the Unigroup, stuff like that. But a lot of those big corporate van lines, they're just so antiquated with their softwares and their technology,
Hmm.
and their workforce is starting to age out. So I think that there could be a big opportunity down the road. And so it's going to be a big topic at the retreat. I'm excited to learn more about it, and definitely excited to kind of hear who's interested in possibly getting involved in something in the long term. But we're coming up here on time. I just have two more questions. First one is, what would you tell your younger self if you were just starting out, if you knew what you know now?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Uh, I would say it's not going to be easy, but it'll be worth it. Just keep swimming, like Dory says, and urgency of effort and patience for results, which I think I said earlier. But those would probably be the two things, because the impatience can drive you crazy. Especially with social media. You see other people, and it always makes people think they're doing better or different. It's so easy to compare and get down on where you are in the process, and just enjoy the fact that it's part of a process. It's your own journey. It's not you versus somebody else. It's you versus you. And so I think those would be some of the things that I would maybe try to give myself peace of mind in those early days, where it felt like I was, as you mentioned earlier, I think before we started recording, I was kind of coming from a place of scarcity in those early days, not a place of abundance. And I think having the abundance mindset probably would have behooved my younger self.
Yeah, no doubt. And then the last question, I know you're a big reader. Obviously, you're an author. I remember seeing a post years ago where you had a whole stack of new business books getting ready to read. I love reading Audible. I think physically reading is really good for you because it gets your brain working a little bit more. What's your top book recommendation? I know you mentioned the E Myth earlier. Maybe that's still it, but what would you say I should put next on my reading list, or any of the listeners that might be here?
All right, so I just finished, and I'm not a big biography guy, but I just finished the Elon Musk biography by Walter Isaacson. It's a really big book, but the chapters are like 3, 4 pages at a time, so it's just like quick hitters. You can kind of get through it pretty easily, not easily, but didn't feel like that long of a read. That I thought was really eye opening. I mean, that dude is built different. I mean, you talk about maniacal sense of urgency and conviction in his vision, running what is it, 3, 4, 5 different businesses simultaneously that are all 100 million plus $1 billion+ businesses, putting spaceships in the sky, electric vehicles on the road. I mean, it was mind boggling to read. I feel like there's got to be a movie about him pretty soon. Maybe that'll be our next one we can do. So
There you go.
if you like reading about people like that, I would recommend that. And then as far as sort of just self improvement, and which by the way, there are some good self improvement insights from that, just how that guy's wired, things to do and things not to do that sort of hold him back, but also obviously are keys to him getting to where he is. One is an oldie but goodie, but I reread it recently and it still spoke to me. Is Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. It's kind of an old school book, but the concepts in it are timeless, and it just, I don't know, it spoke to me. So I would recommend that one.
Love it. Love it. I'll definitely check those two out. Nick, how can people get in touch with you, or if they just want to follow your journey, or always doing some exciting thing with College Hunks or anything,
Sure.
any of these other side projects? What's the best way to get in touch, or just to check you out?
Yeah, so I have a branded site, nickfriedman.com, nickfriedman.com. That's got, I think, links to my social media platforms, and also a contact form if people wanted to reach out about, opportunities or speaking or otherwise. Of course, our College Hunks website's not hard to find, and social media and so forth is not hard to find. It's, at College Hunks is the College Hunks social media handle. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And like I said earlier, I think it's cool what you're doing for the industry. I think our industry was, both on the franchise side, but also even on the moving and hauling side, kind of late to the game in terms of creating a sphere of influence and shared learning with each other. I think for the longest time, the moving industry, for whatever reason, it felt like, like if I'm going to help you, then I'm hurting me. And it wasn't that abundance mindset. But you look at any other industry, whether it's medical, real estate, marketing, consulting, you name it, attorneys, they're all competing with each other, but there's an association, there's, conferences, there's learning peer-to-peer groups. So I think it's cool that you've assembled, this platform to help, just elevate all ships.
I appreciate that. The end game here is we want to just lift up the entire industry, decommoditize the industry, weed out all the bad
Yeah.
guys, and just
We got to all raise our prices. That should be the theme at not in price fixing terms, but we got to talk about how we can raise prices as an industry, in my opinion, because man, everything costs twice as much: insurance, labor, marketing, Google, you name it. And I don't think we've been able to move our pricing up, 5-10%, if that. So there's got to be something out there strategically, whether it's, fee structure or otherwise, that, allows the movers to get paid what they're worth, but the moving companies to earn what they're worth and stay in business, because people call it unskilled labor, but it is skilled labor. I've tried to move recently, and I'm the only one that breaks stuff because, you need a skilled mover to come do it. And so our movers, that came and did my move, they were awesome. They looked like real professionals. It's hard freaking work. And so I think it's time that the industry make what it deserves. The companies make what they deserve. And the only way that we do that is if people stop trying to undercut each other.
No, I agree 100%. I always say it's a low barrier to entry, but it's a high barrier to success. Anybody with a pickup truck or a box truck can try to start a moving company, but not a good one. And our goal with the Titan Retreat, with the Titan Up training that you see behind me, the podcast, is to make that gap between the great companies and then your entry level, chuck and a truck guys so wide that customers can automatically know the difference between a professional and just some random person off Craigslist just providing some labor with a U-Haul truck. So, it's decommoditizing the industry. And the only way to really do that is to change the perception that consumers have in their mind and erase that stigma that they have of movers. So that's what we're all going for, man. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing you in a couple months at the retreat. Let's catch up before that though. We live in the same town. There's no excuse not to. So we got to get
anytime. Just let me know. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Sounds good, brother. Well, thanks, Nick. Nick Friedman with Hunks Hauling Junk, one of the co-founders of one of the largest moving franchises in the country. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you would like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan Retreat, or interested in owning or working for Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.